Hello.
What fun.
Hello.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening, everybody.
Evening.
Hey there.
Buenas tardes.
Hello, everyone. Kia ora
Oh,
from
Damon, what time is it over there where you are, Damon?
Bonsoir.
6:30 a.m.
How many?
6:30 a.m.
All right. Well, that's kind of you. It's
Good to
not
see
the
you.
most
And then
successful.
Hello from Algeria.
Hey, if everybody wants to put the country where you're sitting instead of your last name, that would be just wonderful if you're game for that.
Hello from Algeria.
So it's fun. If like Damon, you become Damon Australia, and Julian, you become Julian wherever you sit. And we have Kevin New Zealand, Alexander Zwiebel or Zwiebel, depending on how you pronounce that. If you do that, that becomes just super fun. We have Ryan, USA, Southpal, if you will put in Scotland, so you can be Southpal, Scotland. I recognize some people's. Kay, now, Kay, where are you in Utah at the moment, or are you in like Austin, Texas, where it's equally snowy like in Utah?
I am in Utah. We don't have much snow.
I was in
Just
Utah.
an inch. Are you in Utah?
I was in Utah on Sunday and scraped 6 inches of snow off the top of my car.
So you headed back to Florida then
I'm now
immediately?
in Florida, where there's nothing worse than rain and a hurricane.
Hi, Damon.
Hey, there's Eve, Belgium. Thank you. Hi, Jenny, US. Dave, US. It's fun. Michael in the Canaries. That's good.
Where's Cockburn country?
It's Coburn country. If you're part of the Coburn clan, then it's Coburn country.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Oh, I'll do that in the announcements then, so we learn how to pronounce my name right. I haven't done that in a while. I used to do that like all the time. USA, Helgi in Sweden. Hejsan, hur går det?
Hello, Kay. Oh, I just see.
Good.
Helgi, ja, är du svensk?
Isländsk.
Isländsk, okej. Men det går. Nice. We have a Hawaii. Just change your name. Bosnia, Leila. Can you just write Leila Bosnia for your name? That's so much fun. And that way, we have Knut, Norway. Går det gott, Knut?
Okay, yeah, I'm fine. It's been like a little bit more than 20 years ago since we met last time in Bergen.
Ah, what were we doing in Bergen?
I think we did some crystal stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, Chris, that's dangerous to say online these days. If you say, you know.
Well, everything changes, right?
And Kevin's in New Zealand, so that's what, like 4 a.m. or is that 6 a.m., 8 a.m. there?
That it's a respectable 8:30.
Yeah, Daryl and Damon and the Australians are the brave ones. I see
Right.
Steph in Melbourne. Hi, Steph. Hey, you know, I've been actually getting kind of like homesick because this is the first year I haven't gone south of the equator for January time frame, and I'm seeing everybody posting pictures of the summer down there, and it's just kind of really doing weird things to my brain. I see Lemmy in Turkey, Rocio, hola. Nuno in Sweden. That's so much fun. Mike in Austria. Mike. I'm just saying hello to all the people while we're warming up here. So nice.
You could put some music to warm up.
No.
Okay, I'm going to. Hi, Rocio. I'm I'm posting the YouTube live that we are broadcasting now, in case you have any colleagues that want to join, and we're up to 100 now. So if you want to share it in your social media, we are live in that URL.
Yeah. All right. Well, I have turned off all my gadgets, so hopefully the phone isn't going to interrupt me in the middle of this. And I'm going to roll it. How's about that? Are you all set then, Solit?
Yes. All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining and welcome. You know, we are having this meeting in the context of the Agile 20 Reflect Festival. And I have a kind of similar. And the festival is going around for almost entire February already because of the 20th anniversary of the manifesto. So thank you, Alistair, for having this second round, this time in English, of getting back a little bit in time with history and stories about what happened in these last 3 decades that you've been working to get to the Agile Manifesto. And we're going to divide this kind of interview more like a storytelling moderated with some questions in pre-manifesto time, the manifesto meeting itself, what happened there in Snowbird, and what the future or what is happening after that Agile, famous Agile meeting. So let's go to the pre-manifesto meeting.
Sure.
What's happening?
Let's talk
that.
about that. So this is my third time doing this, actually. I did the first one was in Spanish. So if you have any Spanish-speaking friends, I did the whole thing in Spanish about a week ago. And then I had an opportunity to do it actually twice in English, I think, once for the Norwegian Agile crowd and once for the Washington, D.C. Agile crowd. And so in the sense I've practiced a little bit what are the questions that tend to come up, but throw some questions in the chat and Solo will watch for those and fit those in. So here's what's on my mind, and it'll be like, you know, I'll spend most of the time, maybe even like half an hour on the 90s because really so few people know that, and I kind of want to get my knowledge of that on record. And then a bunch of time on, you know, maybe 15 minutes or something like that on the meeting itself. Again, my recollection of that. And the smallest amount of time on what's happened since. It's really, you know, it's an opportunity to put on the record at least my section of the knowledge of all the stuff that led up to that. My story started in 1991. And so for me, the meeting in 2001 was a sum up of the previous 10 years of work. And I got my PhD dissertation out of that work in 2003, but I started writing it in around 99 or 2000. So those things were for me, like the publication of my Agile software development book, the writing of the manifesto, and the PhD were all kind of a big lump, a wrap up of what happened in the 90s. So I'm going to go over that in some amount of detail. There's 3 threads that I want to be very, very clear about that came together at the meeting, because the meeting was extraordinary in a way that no other meeting has been that I've ever been to in my life. And I think it was the joining of those 3 threads that made it somehow particularly interesting and particularly different. And I say, like, all the time, there were 17 people in the meeting. Nobody takes any special credit for anything that happened in the meeting. What's really wonderful is all of the people who actually maybe suggested anything we used have never come forward to say that they were the person who suggested that, you know, whatever the word agile or the structure that we used or anything. And that's because they're all very conscious of the fact that we had 17 strong-minded people in the room. And it didn't matter, like in a brainstorming session, you know, everybody's popping words out. It doesn't really matter who pops a word out. 17 people have to agree that that word, that construct, that something suits them. So everything was a full construct of 17 people. So like I say that over and over and over again. And Sola, if you've got spare capacity, because I might not, did I send you, or shall I send you, if I haven't already, I could and send you a picture of the plaque that they just put up in Snowbird? Do you have that? I put that on Facebook and Twitter, and I could grab it if you need me. But what's cool about that, it has the 17 names and not the words of the manifesto, and that's actually going up in the room in Snowbird, so people can go get that. So with that in mind, you know, what I'm going to tell you is what I knew of the conversations, a network of conversations that preceded the meeting, that permitted the meeting to be what it was. And I was party to some number of those conversations, and I was not party to some number of those conversations, and other people were. I'll give you at least the table of contents as I have it. And the three parts were the patterns movement, the wood conferences, and the people doing lightweight methodologies and processes in the 90s. And they all kind of like happened at the same time. So my personal journey, I was living and working in Switzerland for IBM in 1990, and I needed to come back to the US. So I got a job with the newly, there we go, thank you, Sola. I got a job with the newly constructed IBM consulting group. And they were looking for a methodology and a process for projects that were going to be using Smalltalk and C++, so object-oriented programming languages. And they had a very nice methodology that was incremental, iterative, client-centric, tailorable, like really way ahead of its time for 1991. And all they needed was to have the Smalltalk and C++ parts plugged in. But when I looked at it, none of the object-oriented database, none of that stuff would plug in because of the structure of objects. We didn't have the same roles. We didn't have that thing. So I said to my boss, I said, well, I got all the books, you know, the books at the time, Jim Rumbaugh book, Ivar Jakobsen's book, Stephen Schlermeller's book, and significantly, as will show up, Rebecca Wirsbrock book, Designing Object-Oriented Software, because she was there. I want to say that her book was already out, and it was what I learned from in the early 90s. And when you ask why weren't women at the workshop, she should have been there. And that was just a bad mistake. So she was already there, and I'll keep referencing her, Ward Cunningham, Kent Beck, and Martin Fowler, like over and over and over again in these conversations. Anyway, so my boss said, I got the books. They all disagree. I don't know anything about methodology. Like, what should I do? And she said these famous words. And she said, we don't have any competing products in the space. We just want something that works. How about you go and interview some projects and find out what works and doesn't work, and we'll just write that down. And I said, okay. So I started, she gave me unlimited airplane tickets, and I flew literally all over the world. I flew to Sweden to study under Ivar Jakobsen and his use cases. I flew to New Zealand to interview a project that was doing a thing called Sapient, which was a kind of a reflective, meta-reflective mainframe system that worked on 3270 terminals. I went up to Toronto. I went up to Minneapolis. I interviewed IBM labs in different places. And it became very clear very quickly that there were thousands of ways to fail and not very many ways to succeed. So I restricted all of my interviews to two questions. The project had to deliver, and I didn't say deliver on time, on budget, like literally deliver. Like the bar is really low here, just deliver. And the second question that caused the most difficulty was, I said, and the team has to be willing to work the same way again. And I didn't say happy to, I didn't say delighted, I just said willing, literally willing to work the same way again. And I can't tell you the number of people who said, hey, Alistair, come interview our projects. And I said, did the project deliver? And the people are willing to work the same way again. And they would like hear the second question and they'd go, oh, no, maybe never mind. And I'm going like, if the people aren't willing to work the same way again, why am I interviewing? What is this as a way of working, right? That the people are, you have a successful project, but the people are not even willing to work the same way again, right? Why am I interviewing? So that really, shrank the number of projects that I interviewed. A giant one that I interviewed was the Brooklyn Union Gas project. But that one just worked so well, I couldn't learn anything because I was, if a person just does everything right from the beginning, you can't tell what they did. So the ones I learned from were the ones that were like failed and then recovered, and that was really interesting. So 91 to 94, 92, I wrote the first methodology for IBM, and all it had was use cases, CRC cards, incremental development, and versioning. So the only tool there was a versioning system, right? So that was in 92. And I decided I would make the error of omission, that is, say I would leave everything out. I didn't want to have to recant, right, on the recommendation. I wanted to just like get it right. I said, okay, if you have incremental development and you use cases for requirements and you use CSC cards for design and you have a versioning tool, then I don't know, then you're going to be okay, right? Then we can add stuff. And in 93, I added patterns because the patterns was just coming out in 93 and stuff like that. So that was in 92. So that was my start, and everything that I basically have to say comes out of project interviews. So my crystal clear methodology is literally, I've never used it myself. I literally wrote down and said, people say if you do this, it works. And I wrote it down in a book. And the book basically says, put 6 people alone in a room, give them access to the customer, deliver and reflecting, all will be good. And it works. Like people write to me and say, yeah, I did that and it works. Like that's no time boxes, no sprints, no nothing. Like just do that. And that's crystal clear in a nutshell. So anyway, that takes me. So I was then in 94, we had our first real project with Ralston Purina, fixed price, fixed time, 18-month, $10 million, 50 people, 12 small talk programmers, which was huge at the time. Nobody knew what to do with 12 small talk programmers. We had DBAs, DB2, all that kind of stuff. And we, guess what? We had 3-month increments. We did not use time boxes. We had 2 demos per delivery. We did everything, and I lived out of my stories because all I had was stories. We didn't know anything. So, and then we failed, and then we fixed that. And we used the stories to change this. And we invented cross-functional teams for ourselves, and, we invented stuff, and we used everything. And we came out successfully at the end, delivered after 18 months, much to my surprise. And a lot of the other projects were failing. And basically we did what I came to be called Crystal Orange, in which we had, 50 people and a couple of different technology teams, but it was all communication centric, right? All I knew was everybody had to talk with everybody, and you had to like just iterate and cycle and fix and then ship every 3 months, right? That's all I knew. And that became called Crystal Orange. So that was 94, 95. Now at the same time, 94, 95, the Scrum guys, Jeff Sutherland and Ken Schwaber had written the first Scrum paper, which, by the way, I did not understand, just to be honest about that. I thought they were hiding the goods. Literally, I saw the paper and I said, no. You have to tell me what you're really doing. Like, I literally didn't understand the words about, like, just make a backlog, and work off the backlog, and a month later show it. Like, even though my methodology wasn't a lot different, I didn't understand the paper. In 96, 7, Kent Beck was on the Chrysler project, payroll project, and they were doing first drafts of extreme programming. And so that was there. Jim Highsmith was at Nike trying to figure out what they were doing, and he wrote that down in a book called Adaptive Software Development. The guys in Australia, some people were doing FDD, feature-driven development, and they were writing that. And most remarkable to me, and I didn't know much about it, in England and the Netherlands, they were coming up with a Dsdm, Dynamic Systems Development Method, use, what a mouthful. But the Dsdm method, nobody knows about it, but it was brilliant. The reason nobody knows about it is they put it under lock and key, intellectual property control, all kinds of controls. And because it was so tightly controlled, nobody found out about it. But when we came down off the mountain, like days or a week later, I looked at the 9 principles of Dsdm, and I just went, we could have taken those exactly as written, not a change. It was all there. They had everything there. Client centricity, incremental development, prototyping, risk reduction, it was all there. But anyway, I'm getting ahead of the story. So that's the thread that we know about, right? So Scrum was represented with about 3 people at the meeting. There were 6 people at the meeting from XP. We got John Kern to represent FDD. I tried to get Jennifer Stapleton, one of the organizers of the Dsdm consortium. I had met her before. Tried to get her to come, but there wasn't enough notice, so she couldn't come. So Ari van Bennekom came. So I wasn't concerned at that time with the gender diversity. I was concerned with international diversity. So we got Australia represented, Europe represented, and of course, the US represented. About, I don't know, 98, 99 time frame, the pragmatic programmers came out with their stuff, so they were there represented. So we had, and all of these people, all of these groups had done industrial strength projects in the 90s, mine 94, 95, Scrum, and then XP 97, 98, that kind of time frame. So these were like industrial usage, right? So there was no, we didn't have to make up stuff. We had been doing stuff for all of us for 5, 8, 10 years, whatever the number might have been. So that's the one thread, right? That's the lightweight methods that people know about, that these things were being explored. What most people don't know was there was a network of conversations in different communities. And as people would move from community to community, they would bring the memes and the social rules from the one to the other. And those 2 communities were the wood workshops and the patterns community. So the patterns community projects started like 92 or something like that, because I already had the design patterns book, the Gang of 4 patterns, in 93, because I was already working in IBM. So I saw them, like in early stages. And then they started at the University of Illinois at Atherton. They had 94, 95, the first patterns workshops, the writers workshops. And the thing that was so important about that was there's a manner of dialoguing they were experimenting with, where you would do, instead of a peer review paper, you would workshop a paper. The author would be in the room. You'd give the author direct advice on how to improve. And there's a community. There were a lot of games being played, a lot of, it was very human-centric, very conversation-oriented, very positive, like this is a brilliant pattern, but the author needs to fix this, right? So that practice you'll see showed up in the manifesto meeting, 2001. So I attended that in 95, then it came out in Europe. So I went in 97, 98. So there were these twice a year in Europe and in the US. There were these patterns writers workshop meetings. And here we'll find, guess what? Ward Cunningham, Ken Beck were amongst the founders. Martin Fowler was an early contributor. Jim Copleen, who didn't come to the meeting but might have, he was core in the patterns community. Mike Beadle, who was at the meeting, and by the way, in a sense you might say represented, Latin American people. He was deep in the patterns community. He was writing patterns for Scrum with Jim Copleen. So the pattern community, the social context was very strong. And the third one is that was relevant is this WOOD, W-O-O-D, Workshop on Object-Oriented Design, that was started by John Hopkins, and John Hopkins, J-O-N-H-O-P-K-I-N-S, gets like very little credit. So those of us who were there shout out his name every time. Very self-effacing. And in 94, maybe even in 93, because I moved to Salt Lake in 93, I missed it. So I went to, the first one I went to was in 94 and I went to 95. And he just liked to ski, that's how Snowbird enters into the picture. So, and he knew that the second week in February is the best ski week in Utah, the middle week, which is, they're snowed in right now, right? So we're in that time period. And literally, I was up there last week we had 11th, 12th, 13th of February. It was dry on Wednesday. It started snowing on Friday, and I scraped 6 inches of snow off the top of my roof on Friday, scooted down the hill because they didn't want to get snowed in, and they were snowed in on Saturday. So that's, and John knew that, and he's a skier. And so he arranged these things. He said, let's just have a workshop about, you know, object-oriented design stuff. And his invitation list was amazing. When I went there in '94, you know, I kind of sneaked in because I lived at the bottom of the mountain. Ivar Jakobsen was there, Agneta Jakobsen was there, Adele Goldberg and Kenny Rubin were there from the Small Talk book. Jim Rumbaugh was there, Larry Constantine was there, Lucy Lockwood was there, Norm Kurth was there, Ward Cunningham was there, Kent Beck was there, and I don't think Martin Fowler was there that first year. So you can see the quality of conversation that we had, and it started off, you know, like, who wants to put anything on the agenda? What are we going to talk about while we're here? So we'd construct an agenda, would run like 1 hour, 2 hour, half-hour sessions, morning conversation, skiing in the afternoon, evening conversation, dinner, right? Sit in the hot tub, whatever, and do that for 2 days or something like that. So that's not accidental. So we have that pattern. And since I organized the Agile meeting in Snowbird, I literally copied the Wood Conference because I was literally organizing that conference anyway. And we just like shifted the agenda to be, you know, for the manifesto. So that was in '94, '95. In '98, I was in Norway. So shout out to all the people from Norway. I was working for Norges Bank in '97, '98. And it had been some years we hadn't done one of these. So I, you know, wrote to Ward Cunningham and Rebecca Wirfsbrock, right? Alan Wirfsbrock, Jim Copleen, Kent Beck. I can't remember who all else was in those things. Trygve Reinskau, very significantly. And so I said, hey, let's do this on this, the boat, the mail boat. It's called the Hurtigrute in Norway. It does all the fjords in Norway. And they have one, the biggest one is built up so you can have conferences on it. So we did a session where we did 4 fee. We did a 1-day talk in Oslo, a 1-day talk in Trondheim. And we used the money to help pay people's airfares to come over, and then everybody paid their own way on the ship. And we did, guess what? We did the same thing. So we had the meeting room, just like it was Wood, '98 on the Hurtigrute. And it's like, what do you want to talk about? You know, and everything was patterns and objects and incremental and XP, and those were the big topics of the time. So in 2000, I'm back in Salt Lake City and go, it's time to do the next Wood workshop, right? It's going to be February of 2001, second week in February. I'll just do Wood. And I started collecting my invitee list, you know, the usual suspects, as they say. And right about at that moment, Bob Martin wrote, and I did ask him, by the way, recently, directly, I said, why did you want to write a manifesto? And he said, and here's where you see the communities of conversations. He goes, Martin Fowler and I were at a workshop, a group, a gathering for extreme programming the week or two before, talking about creating a global community for XP, and the crowd didn't want to create a global community. So we came back, and we were both living in Chicago at the time. And we're talking, and I go, well, we ought to try to do something, you know? So Bob Martin sent out this email to a bunch of people, like 30, 35 people. And he said, I think that a bunch of us kind of sound alike. I think there's something deeper underlying it, and I want to write a manifesto. So I asked him just last week when we were up there, I said, why manifesto? Like, that's a heavy word. I happen to hate manifestos. I thought it was stupid to write a manifesto. I was, you know, generally against writing manifestos. So you can see like how wrong I can be, and don't ever ask me to predict the future, because I'm about as wrong as you can ever be about the future. But I thought he had some, like, he was really a manifesto guy, but he said, manifesto is a nice word. We might as well write a manifesto. Like, it wasn't a deep attachment. But anyway, so his invitation list was full of people like Grady Booch and Tom DeMarco and people that I didn't know. So his topic was better than my topic, and his invitation list was better than my invitation list. Only he wanted to hold it in Chicago in February, which is just the worst place in the world. if you know what I mean, Chicago in February, it's just cold wind off Lake Michigan, and all you do is freeze and you can't even ski. So Jim Highsmith and I were in Salt Lake, so we kind of like, you know, Shanghaied it. And I said, look, I'll organize it. We'll do it at Snowbird, etc. You know, so that's how we got to be Snowbird. So I set it up, and I have to give a small shout out to Cutter Consortium. Jim Highsmith had just started working for them, and so they helped sponsor it. You know, not a huge. Yeah, JD says, yeah, believe him, Chicago in February. Yeah, that's the worst month ever. And so Cutter, you know, they bought us all drinks the first night, you know, when we didn't know each other and like, what are we doing here and stuff. So that was nice. So shout out to Cutter that they get credit for, you know, at least putting some money in the pot. And so now we get to the meeting, right? So we're all up there in Snowbird, and I'll pause right here. Sola, are there any questions? I'm going to pick up the why no women at the end of the meeting, because that's when the answer makes sense.
Yes.
What do we have?
In Twitter, I see that Rebecca Rustock tried to join, but she couldn't because there was no space. There was a question. Let me see.
Shout out to Rebecca.
Yes.
I'll post a video. You can see it. Hey, can you ask her just on Twitter to just ask any question or say whatever?
Yeah, I already posted the YouTube live. Everybody's watching there. So we have a question that says, at which point, what was the trigger that led you to there must be a better way, or was always a belief and your thoughts came together over time?
Oh, that's interesting. So I knew nothing about methodology, like literally zero. And I was in the methodology department of the IBM Consulting Group. And they had some guys they had somebody from Anderson Consulting, and the Big Five, whatever. So they'd hired some execs from the Big Five. And I remember coming into a meeting room, and this guy draws on the whiteboard like an ER diagram, boxes and arrows and stuff, and says, this is a methodology, right? And so there were like 12 boxes and lines, and you have roles and processes and work products and ceremonies, and you know, this is the definition of what is a methodology. And I go, I guess that's a methodology, because everybody in the room just goes, sure, you know, and I'm the newbie on the block. So I believed that was a methodology, and what I knew was nothing, because the books just all disagreed. But the books were just how to draw boxes and arrows, except for Rebecca Wirfsproff's book, which was, you know, do CRC cards and, you know, think about it, design a certain way. So Damon, I never thought there must be a better way. I started from a blank sheet of paper, right? None of this is my own. I want to be super clear about that. If you ever hear anybody say, you know, like whatever, Agile comes from Scrum, Agile comes from Lean, blah, blah, blah. They have to explain my history, because I started from nothing. It's called grounded theory. I got my PhD in it. And I sat with bits of paper on the floor, looking for patterns, like what did anybody say? And they just said, this works and this doesn't work. And at the time I would ask them, what about computer-aided design tools? What about these processes? What about, right? And they would just go, so most people would say useless things like, I don't know, we just didn't use them. But I found one person, one project, and they said, we tried it with the case tools and without the case tools, and we found we went faster without the case tools. So I had one like serious data point where they said, it's faster without, right? And I got all of those things, right? But basically anybody who was doing anything, and there was literally no way to talk about this in 92, 93, it would be like, I don't know, there's three of us. No, I had the guy in New Zealand with the mainframe, I think it was called Sapient, the reflective database system thing. He was very clear. He said, if you let me have 4 people in one room and access to the customers, I will guarantee you a successful project. If you push on me, I'll accept 2 rooms with 4 people each, so 8 people total. If you need more than 8 people, I'm out. Like I don't know how to do it. So get somebody else and you won't succeed anyway, but I'm not touching it, right? So I got like one person super clear about the human, you know, conversation, the size, what I came to call osmotic communication. But anything that was in the literature, nobody referred to. Like there was just a giant silence. It was just put people in a room and let them talk to each other, end. Which, by the way, you know, actually works, by the way. So yeah, and then I lived off the stories. And literally my first book, Surviving Object-Oriented Projects, is just bunches of stories. You read it, the stuff just works. You know, we were on that project in 94, 95, and stuff was going wrong. And at the beginning, you know, I would say, well, you know, we're all staring at each other like, I don't know, what do you want to do? I don't know, what do you want to do? None of us knew anything. We'd never seen any of this before. And so I would say, well, I heard a story because I had been like talking to like everybody I could talk to. I heard a story, they said, blah, 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 blah. We did blah, blah. I go, how about we try that? So we tried and it worked. And then I did that for months. And then eventually I stopped saying I heard a story and I just said, how about we just do this, right? That's how you know I became a consultant at that moment, because I just started giving advice instead of telling the story. Now I've reverted. These days I don't give the advice, I only tell the stories, and it's actually works even better. Because then you just say, I don't know, I heard a story where, and the people go, that's right, I can do that. And you don't have to ever, like, you don't have to ever take accountability for giving advice. You just tell stories. And it is the bestest ever way to consult. And that's the way I consult these days, is just find stories and let people draw their own conclusions. So yeah, there was no better way, Damon. It was just follow the path. Just believe what the people say, try it out and it works. And then as you guys, some of you guys know, the difference between me and other people is my dad was a scientist. So I keep trying to like work out, why does this work? Or not, why does this work? Why should we believe that this works, right? So why is it you put 3 people, 6 people in a room and it works, you know, and that's osmotic communication, trust, host community, frequency, contact, facial expressions, right? So since 91, 92, I've been trying to decode, why do these things work? And all of my writings are about like here's the story and here's like why you could believe that it could work. And then you try to build the science up like out of that. So that's my history. Let me see. How long, I'm looking at the chat, Sola. How long does talk about good practice take from beginning to end in a meeting on Utah? We talk about good practice. Reynaldo Barros. How long does talk about good practices? Well, we'll talk about Utah. 3 spots open, see if we can get Rebecca in. We'll talk about the past 2 decades after, because, you know, a lot of people can talk about the last 2 decades. Very few people can talk about the 90s. So I really want to give a shout out to all the people in the 90s who were building this stuff up. Let's, if it's okay, jump to the manifesto meeting.
Yes, please.
Yep. So the manifesto meeting. So the key thing, and on this cup here is written, the top sentence, it says, increase the quality of listening. And that sentence comes here because I asked myself literally for like 10 years, why did the meeting work? Because it shouldn't have, right? You have 17 men with egos, published books, methodologies, competitors. We even had Stephen Meller there and he was the enemy. So there was like no way that this thing should have worked. And so why did it work? And here's where I can hope that maybe the influence from the patterns, the writer's workshop came in. So we were practiced in dialing in a certain way, but we had people who didn't know each other at all. So there should have been fights. And why were there no fights? And all I can say, it's a key phrase, is there was the most generous listening in the room that I've ever seen in my entire life. I've been part of 4 or 5 manifesto writing workshops, and everybody scratched themselves to death. It was just cat scratching from beginning to end. But we didn't get anywhere. So let's take a look at the people in the room. As I said, 6 people from XP, 3 from Scrum, and then we had, you know, 1 of all these other people. Well, one of the people was Stephen Meller. Okay, so Stephen Meller was in the enemy camp. I have no idea how he got invited. He shouldn't have been there by all rights. He was, you know, designated enemy number like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We knew who our enemies were, by the way. You can see them in the manifesto. Project Management Institute, PMI, with all of its get back to plan. CMI with all its process, CMMI level 1, 2, 3 to 5, all that stuff. rational unified process with all of its tool focus. We knew who the enemies were, and amongst them was Steve Miller, right? So he was the other guy, tools and drawings. So we get there, we see Steve there, and we're all going like, oh my God, like who let this guy in? Like, Bob, what was on your invitation list? Why did you let this guy in? So we introduced, but nobody says anything. And that's the amazing part, right? And we introduce ourselves and he says, hi, I'm Stephen Miller and I'm a spy. Just like that. And we all just like stare at him like, he just said it. Okay, here we go, right? Like literally like, yeah, roll with it, right? But that's the moment you see that the listening was turned on, right? The egos were, the trust, there was some sort of honoring people that was there. And this is super important. And when I was talking actually with him last week, you know, we had the Scrum Alliance did a big a video with the 7 of us they could collect. And literally I told him this and asked him this story, right? So we've already gone through this. There was a moment where Ron Jeffries and I were talking to Stephen Miller, right? And so if there's anything we agreed on was don't use Stephen Miller's methodology, because you draw drawings and you push buttons and you don't push buttons and you end up with code. And like we couldn't stand all these drawings. And so we're talking to him and Ron's going like, what's on your mind with all these drawings? And Stephen Miller says, well, my end game is that the drawings are going to be the source code. You will program with these drawings and you'll push a button and all the code will come out. And Ron says, yeah, but then you have to maintain the code. That's no good because then the code's out of date with the drawings. And Stephen says, no. When I get done, you'll be able to maintain the drawings and the code. It'll be the source code. You won't have to do anything else. So Ron and I look at each other and go, well, I don't care what the source language is. If it's drawings and text, it's just as good for me as if it's text. As long as I do my evolution there, it's good for me. And at that moment, we were all on the same side of the table. At that moment, the tease was, because I did this with Stephen last week, and I said, Stephen came over to our side of the table, right? And Stephen said, no, you all came to my side of the table, right? But yeah, no, the light shone and we were all on the same side of the table. We didn't have a disagreement. He had a research program that he was in the process of. And when we saw what his end goal was, we literally had no more disagreements after that. So that's the kind of generous listening that was phenomenal. There was one other one where we were doing the principles and I was standing in front of one of the principles and it says, deliver working software every few weeks to every few months with a preference for the former. And the reason I remember that, because I was standing there with Ward Cunningham and I had a rule, every team has to deliver working software every 3 months. Cannot go longer than 3 months because of, energy, focus, feedback, all that stuff. And XP were doing, and here's what, I didn't catch the word difference. They were using iterations and I was using deliveries, but they didn't have to deliver after every iteration. So they were doing iterations every 3 weeks, but they weren't delivering every 3 weeks, right? But I didn't catch that. So Ward is standing there and I go, no, every 3 months. And I know he thought I was crazy at that moment, like Alistair's lost it, because you would never in XP try to go 3 months without delivering stuff. And he said, he just goes like, but would you agree that there's a preference to the weeks instead of the months? And I go, sure, of course. I just say there's a bottom line, don't go past 3 months. And he goes, okay. So we had made that adjustment, right? So, but that's the manner. You see the gentleness of that dialogue, right? And that was key, beginning to end. All right, now we'll do the process of what happened. So now you have the attitude, you can a little bit foresee how it's going to roll forward. So we get there and I'm expecting what I call cat scratching when you get a bunch of people meeting for the first time and everybody has, how are we doing the agenda? How much time do we planning? When do we start working, right? Whose ideas do we use? It's normal and you can get locked up for a whole day, or forever. And it never happened. So we circle 17 people and somebody says, oh, no, I should back up. So Bob Martin got up at the beginning. Smart guy, he says, I called you here. This is, I think there's something here. rising, what did it say? Rising tide raises all boats, right? So we have some differences, but I believe there's something in common. I think it'd be good to write a manifesto, right? And then he sat down, which is really important with this group, that you don't try to control these people, right? He sat down. Good. So we're sitting 17 people around a circle, and somebody says, so how do we build an agenda? And the extreme programming guys always had index cards in their pockets. And we had 6 of them there, right? So social mass matters. So one of them pulls the cards out of their pocket and they say, just write it on a card. All you XP people know, they always said, just write it on a card. That's a key phrase. So all the XP people pull cards out of their various pockets and start writing stuff and throwing it in the center of the circle, you know, and then the other people, like the Scrum guys and the Dsdm guys who don't know anything, they go, can I have a card? Right? And so then everybody's writing, but you see, we got past this cat scratching because it was a social mass and we had good listening, right? So we end up with a pile of cards on the floor. And then somebody says, how do we make an agenda out of that? And then somebody says, anybody who cares about the agenda, stick around and make an agenda. And anybody who doesn't care, take a coffee break, right? And I don't care, so I took a coffee break. I have no idea what happened. I came back in the room and all the cards were glued to the, you know, taped to the glass. And you'll notice I will keep saying somebody said and somebody said, because nobody knows who said what. And that's the brilliant thing about all of this. And what was super fun was, like, I don't know, 10, 20 minutes later or sometime later, somebody says, hey, how do I add something to the agenda? Right? And somebody else says, just add it to the agenda. And I do remember this face, this guy like, can I do that? And then whoever it was wrote whatever it was and put it wherever they put it on the agenda. And it was on the agenda. I have no idea. I didn't pay any attention at all. So we had a thing on the agenda, right? So that's the kind of meeting we had going. So, okay, we decided, all right, first thing, everybody gets 10 minutes, you know, to describe their methodology. So Ari van Bennekom didn't know anything about XP. Kent Beck said about XP, and Ari van Bennekom understood like nothing. And then Ari van Bennekom described Dsdm, and Kent Beck didn't know about Dsdm, and he like understood nothing. And then everybody took a turn. And then Jim Highsmith and I our ideas were so closely aligned. He was pushing adaptive, and I was pushing crystal. And our stuff was different than the others because we believed that every project should have its own different methodology. And that was different because XP was a methodology, Scrum is a methodology, Dsdm is a methodology. We thought that it should always be different. And so they couldn't tell us apart, literally. So we literally had to split our 10 minutes. They said, we don't know what's the difference between Alistair and Jim, so you guys can split your 10 minutes. So I got 5 minutes to talk about crystal, and he got 5 minutes to talk about adaptive. Right, so we did that. That's fine. And then at the end you go, well, that's all nice. I guess there's something in common. We probably need a word. But what do we call this thing? Because lightweight processes like wasn't really doing it for us, you know, as you could imagine. And I facilitated the name search. Right, we all took turns facilitating different parts of the meeting, and that's the one I facilitated. So I happen to remember something about that. We got up a flip charts and just brainstorm names. That's why it doesn't matter who came up with the name Agile, the adaptive. I have no idea. We had columns of names. And then somebody said, we should maybe try a technique from Jerry Weinberg and say what we don't like about some of the words, right? So it's really interesting and not obvious. That turns out to be a significant thing. So we'd pick one out and say, why don't you like this word? And it's not a veto against the word. We're just trying to find out what is inside your head that you don't like. And the only one I remember that popped up, right? Remember, we have 17 men in the room, 17 middle-aged men in the room. And at one point, there was some light, fluffy word. And somebody says, I don't want to have to wear pink tights and a tutu when I say this word. And that just became the refrain. Every time we would pick out a word that was a little bit, you know, like soft and light, somebody would say, pink tights and tutu, can't do it, right? And so that was, so that like cut out some other words. Anyway, so we did that, what we don't like, and then we went back and did a dot vote on all of the words, got it down to 5. So we figured we'll take it down to 5. We'll do a second round. We did the second round, and here the surprise was we had a tie between adaptive and agile. And that's significant because I think you need both words. And talking with Jim Highsmith, who lived in Salt Lake at the time, I view agile as tracking rapidly changing requirements within a project. I think of that as agility. And adaptive is changing culture more slowly, but to fit the cultural landscape needed to deal with the different projects. So I think you have to have agile and adaptive. And we would see that in this sense, XP is agile but not adaptive, at least XP version 1. And anybody here who thinks they know what XP is, my bet is that you're locked onto XP version 1 and not XP version 2, right, Kay? Just nod your head, Kay. This is a good time to nod your head. Thank you very much. And because hey, Jean, and Jean's an old XP guy. There you are. We got you. So XP is agile but not adaptive, and the rational unified process is adaptive but not agile. Right, so Jim Highsmith and I wanted both agile and adaptive in all of the things, and we could have taken the one or the other, right? So we had a discussion, we had another vote. Agile came out above adaptive. We went, okay, there's that. Now I have no memory about the timing. Like it was a 2.5-day meeting, and I don't know when the breaks were, but obviously we went skiing in the afternoon. So there was skiing in the afternoon, right, and nighttime, and I don't know exactly when the shifts were. So the next thing was, okay, we have a word. That's cool. Agile, that's a nice word. What does it mean? Like, what does it do, right? And that must have happened just before skiing, because I went skiing. We had nice conversations, you know, that stuff. You get private room conversation on the lift. So Jim and I had talked. So the big skiers were John Kern, James Grinning, Jim Highsmith, me, and I can't remember who else was a skier. So we had a little private conversations up on the lift. You know, what do you think about? Where are we going? What do we aspire to? Da, da, da. And down below, everybody else was working on the, you know, whatever came next, right? So we came back down, and I suspect it was about that point that we came in and we saw the this over that. So it was after lunch break, anyway, and everybody recognized that a this over that was a good structure, and here's where we see the patterns community again, because this was it's a very non-confrontational group. How do you do yes and, right? How do you yes and things? And so this over that's useful, but this is more useful. That language comes out of these communities of conversation. I do believe, my suspicion. Right, but then we had to workshop it, because you have 17 people, and like everybody's got a different view, or they're 3, or they're 5, or they're 7. How many they're going to be? And here's where it got really remarkable, because I remember we had the whiteboard in front, 17 people in a kind of a horseshoe. I would say, so what do you think about that, right? And then people would be, you know, like this, and you could go for consensus, right? But we decided to go for unanimity. So not that we decided to, it just was the listening that was in the room. You know, so we go to the first sentence, and so how does everybody feel about that? And somebody would be, you know, like this, and they'd say, so what bothers you about that? And I said, well, it bothers me because something or the other. And then we would all problem solve and try to find words that would fix that person's, right, difficulty, like that. And we did that all the way through. And I remember my particular one was, it said, working software over documentation. And I raised my hand. I can't do that. Literally, I cannot go from the room and say working software over documentation. You have to have documentation. It's part of the game. And the best we got was the comprehensive, right? So I yielded and I said, okay, that's not perfect, but it's good enough that I can defend it, right? I can go with that. So we went through, and then there's this moment where we've gone through everything. And we all look at each other and we go, okay, so what do you think about the whole thing? And it's like 17 thumbs straight up in the air. And like we're all staring at each other, because this is an unimaginable result, that we had literally 100% agreement on every single word in there. And it was mind-boggling, to be honest, right? So we did that, and then things started to unravel a bit. Ari had to go back to the Netherlands, and people had planes, and we said, okay, what else is there? Like, if you want to dig, we have values. That's nice. It's a value statement. It's beautiful. It's still a bit vague. Are there any principles behind it? So then we had a workshop, and we had one on each flip chart, and people going around and doing things. But frankly, we still disagreed, right? We disagreed on a day-to-day stuff, and we couldn't get to unanimity, and people were getting on airplanes, and that's when it was, me and Ward Cunningham doing the 3 weeks versus months thing, right? And so we didn't finish it. And then we tried to finish it over email, but man, if you can't finish it face to face, you're for sure not going to finish it over email. So at some point, somebody said, pull the plug, publish whatever. And I have no idea what the second to the last version was versus the last version. Yeah, so then we had so that's the meeting, right? So that's the meeting and the name and the values and the principle. And the last thing to say was we had a recap at the very end. We go like, that was amazing, and why did it work? And we said, well, because we had individuals and interactions over processes and tools. We were face to face, like we were really digging into this together, stuff like that. But what was significant then was the question was, hey, what do we call ourselves, right? Because we're going to put this out so people can sign it. And Ward Cunningham created the website that people could not only sign, they could write a phrase. And that's what we learned within a couple of weeks. Hundreds of people had signed and written phrases about it. So we really knew that we had touched a chord globally. There was a global hunger for this, and we'd found something. So we thought, I guess we're the authors. So we're not the co-signatories, we're the co-authors of the manifesto, and everybody who signed gets to sign it, so everybody can be a signatory. The other thing that becomes super important, as we said, do we update it or not? Right? You people ask the question, are you going to ever update this? And in a sense, it would be good to touch it up, but we can't. Okay, and that was the discussion. We said, look, there were like 35 people invited, and other people who could have been here that weren't invited. Somebody who's here might not have made it. It would have been different if anybody else had been different. It would have been different. It would have been 100% different. Just change one body, everything would have been different. So we can never change it. Like had a discussion at a moment in time. This is a snapshot of whatever's on our mind, and exactly these people in the room. We came up with exactly these words. This can't be updated because it'll be a different construct, a different conversation to get anybody together again in the future. So we decided, when you say, update it, we decided can't, right? So you can update the Constitution of the United States, but you can't update the Declaration of Independence, right? So we said it's this. It's a moment in time. It's a snapshot of a discussion. It's what we got. It does not get updated. Now I get to pick up the question of why were there no women in the room, and what would have happened if there were women in the room. So I invite people to think about who were the published women in lightweight methodologies in 1999. And you get basically Rebecca Wirsbrock. So she was in the word, the
here, by the way, she's listening to you.
I know she's here. Hi, Rebecca, where are you? Show your face. Rebecca, say something so that the screen gets centered.
Okay, hi.
Yeah, there's Rebecca. Everybody, a round of applause for Rebecca.
Hey.
Thank you. Yeah, Rebecca, I told them that I studied your book from 1991 or 92, and that was like what I learned from and wrote about. And you were in you were in the wood workshops. Were you ever in the patterns workshops? You must have been.
No, I actually was a latecomer to the patterns community. And my first patterns I wrote in 2006.
Oh, wow.
I was just doing things. Yeah. And another influence about that collaborative style is definitely shepherding and experience reports and things like that at the UPSLA conference. So the object community had that.
Yeah, right. And I was talking about communities of conversations and networks of conversation, about memes and social norms move between them, right? So there was a close linkage between the patterns community and the UPSLA community.
So I'm still in the patterns community, and I'm still in the Agile community, and I'm still in the design community, and I'm in the DDD community. So yeah.
Yep. All
Don't
right.
be defined by one thing. Yeah.
No. So the question about the women, right? So as far as I know, only 2 women were published in the lightweight methodologies, and that was Adele Goldberg. She co-wrote the book with Kenny Rubin and kind of got out, so she didn't stay in the conversation. And Rebecca, who's been in the conversation like before I got there. Mary Poppendieck came later. 2003 was her first book in the first Agile conference, so she came later. We had Martine de Vos in the patterns community in Europe, but she wasn't published. She could have been there. Bob Martin didn't know about it. We did invite Jennifer. JD, remember Schleyer and Meller were our enemies. So I don't think that Bob would have invited Sally Schleyer, right? We got Bob Meller. And Jennifer Stapleton couldn't make it. So if you have like the 4 people, Rebecca, if I had been doing the invitation list, would have been on the usual suspects list, and I didn't notice she wasn't there. And Jennifer Stapleton couldn't make it, and that was about it. But now, interestingly, I'm going to shift over and say, so why would you want women as well as men? And it's very stereotypical, right? So the stereotypical response, and I'm going to live off of that here for a minute, because I think it actually makes sense, is generally speaking, men don't listen to each other, right? Generally speaking, men all speak and they don't listen. And what you aspire to, in a sense, by adding women to the mix is they're gonna listen, and they're gonna generate some kindness and listening to that. And the thing is, we had the most generous listening there. So adding more women, even with good listening, it wouldn't have changed the listening. The listening was good. Hey, do you ski, Rebecca? I can't remember. Did you ski at the wood conferences?
Yeah, I would go out and ski with Adele. We went on diamond slopes, nearly killed ourselves, but it was a lot of fun.
Cool. Very good. So that wouldn't have changed that. And the last question is, would the output have been different? And the answer is yes, because we already said that if you changed even one person, the output would have been really, really, really different. So yeah, the output, the result would have been different if it had any women there, because the dialogue would have been different from the beginning to the end. So that's what I have to say on the women topic. And I'm going to go for like another 10 minutes, but let's see what we've got for questions.
We have some questions on the same direction as what happened if there were women there. This one you will like. What doors did the Agile Manifesto open and that you didn't expect?
That's I guess. That's
a good one.
Well, I thought that what's missing for me is the reflective improvement, right? So we had 4 values, and those of you who know my writing, I have 3 things, which is close communication, frequent delivery, and reflective improvement. And the reflective improvement part didn't show up until the principles. Here's another thing. If you guys ever get the authors of the manifesto, any of them in the room, ask them which principle they didn't actually like, because we did not get unanimity on the principles. And I can tell you there were 2 that just bothered me, but I couldn't close them out. One is welcoming late changing requirements even late in the project. I want to just be on record. I do not welcome late changing requirements late in the project. I do not welcome them, right? If I'm on the implementation side, I want everything nice and still. Fixed price, fixed contract, right? Fixed requirements. I love it. I love it. I love it. Now, I know better than that, right? So I set up a project to absorb the requirements that come late, but not because I want them, right? Just so, that one. And the thing about self-organizing teams produce the best designs in emergent design. Yeah, I'm not all about that. I don't know that that's true. And emergent is a funny word, because in physics, emergent has weird things like fundamentally unpredictable different properties, right? So I can't live off of that word. However, emergent in English also means like appears slowly like out of a fog, right? So a car emerges from the fog. So I could say that when you start designing, there's a fog, right? And the design emerges like from a fog, but that's not what an emergent property of a system is. So those are the two that kind of gave me heartburn, still do. And people ask, what will you change? We got burned so badly from responding to change over following the plan. And I just have to tell you what was the conversation around that. The conversation is that doing the planning is a valuable activity because everybody's projecting into the future and you're trying to find problems, and it's a mind merge where you try to find the things that, you know, that you can spot, and that's useful. And then you write it down, and then, you know, reality hits, and plans don't last typically more than a week or two before they go bad. And it's a famous dictum in the military, right? That plans, no plan survives contact with the enemy, right? So planning is useful, the plan is not. The way we wrote is responding to change over following the plans, and everybody, all the people who hate planning, all the programmers tell the bosses, I don't have to plan because it's agile. And to me, that's wrong. You have to be better at planning. You have to do it more frequently. You have to get faster and quicker at it, right? Because you're going to have to do more of it. If it goes out of context every 2 weeks, you basically have to replan every 2 weeks, kind of a thing. What else? That's all about that. And I'm going to scan.
Yes, we have some similar.
I'm scanning. Yeah, you know. Oh, okay. It was about software, and is it still about software? So it was about software, right? We were literally trying to get permission to put software out the door, and we were being told we couldn't because we had to do all these funny processes. So the stuff about customer value, we knew about customer value. XP is about customer value. Ward knew it. Kent knew it. Martin knew it. I knew it. Right? It's all the other people. We knew about customer value. The thing is about working software is stuff breaks. You rely on stuff breaking. It doesn't matter how optimistic you are. When your code breaks, it gives you information you can't get any other way. And so Henrik Knieberg in Sweden said working value. I think he just put the word value there instead of software. And responding to change, he said responding to feedback. And if you just change those two words, you're out of software. So a couple, like 6 months later, I'm at Jim Highsmith's house and he says, hey, you recognize that this has nothing to do with software especially, right? And I go, yeah, right. So we've been literally trying since mid-91 to take this out of software. I just want to focus on things that I want to put in the record that you can't get elsewhere. Besides, in 2015, I was challenged to simplify everything, and I came up with the 4 words: collaborate, deliver, reflect, and improve. So you basically get all of that, and people like Chet Hendrickson now. Agile Manifesto is really long and long-winded for 2020, 2021 timeframe. So Chet Hendrickson actually literally introduces Agile through the 4 words: collaborate, deliver, reflect, improve. And you see I put on here that lesson from the manifesto: increase the quality of listening, right? Other things, and deliver small and soon. So when you take it out of software, as we're doing these days in the heart of Agile work, you need other language. You can't right, say even product. So what do? So I go to the decisions. The organization is a giant brain making decisions in a network of decisions that looks a lot like a manufacturing flow line, has the same network properties, so you can apply all of Toyota Production System to the network of decisions flowing through an organization. People make mistakes at the rate of like 1 in 5, 1 in 10 at making decisions. And that starts from the very first strategic statement about the initiative. So we talk about initiatives, we talk about decisions. Everything you deliver to the world is a product of those decisions, and we've got lots of errors in them. So we need to touch the world often, early and often, to get feedback on the decisions to find out where we're wrong in all the things. So that's how the language that we use now in the heart of Agile to talk about these things in all domains, not just software. And I have to say compulsory add for our next course, which will be in March. We have a 3-half-day Heart of Agile Fundamentals in which we'll do the Carpaccio. We can't do the draw the drawing exercise for those of you who know it, but we boiled it down till like we can't boil it anymore. We actually had it as a 2-half-day, and we found we took too much out. We had to put stuff in. So we have a 3-half-day that'll be middle of March. You guys can find that in the chat. And we'll do all the totally not connected to software language, just everything. Org change, social impact projects, churches, families, government, and that's where we are now. Let me see. The last thing I have to talk about, everybody gets upset about certificates and certification. So I have to talk about that. I have a dictum that says that your idea will either get corrupted or ignored. And you don't get to choose. So if you have a good idea and it gets adopted, anybody who sees a power advantage will corrupt it. They'll co-opt it, they'll misquote it, they'll misuse it, they'll misrepresent it. That's called success. The alternative is that nobody knows you exist. So I've written like 3 or 4 manifestos. Nobody ever corrupts those ones because you don't even know they exist. So I've been safe, right? So what happened, Ken Schwaber came up with this thing, Certified Scrum Master. It's a lovely title. People started doing it. Execs saw that they could power moves on each other by having more Scrum Masters than the other guy, right? And then we're off to the races. And now there's, certificate inflation all over the place. And what, by the way, for the Heart of Agile, we started an academy and we still give certificates, but we've decided there are no certified role names anywhere in the university, anywhere in our stuff. So, for example, there's a certified agile marketing specialist, and we offer the course in the academy, but we can't put the certified. So it's just agile marketing, right? You can deepen your skills in facilitation, collaboration, and delivery in Kanban, right? All these things. It's skills based, but no certified X. So certified X then started the wars, and then people co-opted, corrupted, right, misquoted, misused. And I don't mind that because that's just the world saying it was a good idea, right? And so one day, the reason nobody is corrupting Heart of Agile is because not enough people are using it yet. The moment it gets, people see how to get a power advantage out of that, we're going to see how they corrupt it, right? That's what we got. Hey, gang, you've been super patient.
Yes.
We have picked up questions that just talk literally. Now, somebody asks, what are your thoughts about the future of software development? Since we know I can't predict the future because I didn't like writing a manifesto, I cannot give you any thoughts about the future except whatever I say will be wrong.
Okay, you just answered the question I was going to ask. So.
Yeah. Okay, very good. With that, I think that we've really I have used up our time.
Yes, we passed 15 minutes of time.
I know, but these guys are nice.
Yes, they're.
And besides which, we're recording it so other people can see it, and we'll trim out the beginning.
Yes. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for everybody for attending. We will be posting this, and we will deliver the recording to the Agile Festival so they can upload it as well. So have a good day, night, whatever part of the world you are, and see you soon. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Take care,
Thank you.
everybody. Wash your hands.
Oh.
Bye-bye.